Hello, everyone, and welcome to our Tools for Resilience training. My name is Melissa Landfield, and I am the Learning Design Manager for Girl Scouts of Greater Chicago and Northwest Indiana. We're so glad you're here to help learn about how we can support you and the Girl Scouts in our troops to be more resilient, strong, and ready to deal with what life is throwing at them. These slides were developed in collaboration with Anne and Robert H. Lurie, Children's Hospital of Chicago Center for Childhood Resilience. They're our partners in this work, and we are very glad to have them with us. In this first part of our training, we're going to talk about what social emotional learning and trauma-informed practices are, how they're a part of the Girl Scout DNA, and what they have to do with being resilient. And we're going to define what those things are: social emotional learning, trauma, and trauma-informed practices. Before we dig in, I want to say a few words about language. Language is evolving, but we always want to use words that are person-centered, reflect our values of equity and racial justice, and do no harm. So when I talk to you today, I'm not going to talk about traumatized children or at-risk children. I'm going to talk about young people who have experienced trauma, who have been placed at risk of something. A child who's experienced trauma is more than just a traumatized child. It's one part of their experience, but not how they choose to define their whole identity. And for the same reason, instead of saying minorities or girls, I'm going to talk about people of color, Latinx, Indigenous, and ideally, I'd be able to ask what folks would like to be named or called. And while all our members are Girl Scouts, girl isn't the word that all our members identify with. So I'm going to talk about our Girl Scouts, our troop members, our young people, because I want to honor what people feel like are the right words for them and center their experience. In this training, we're going to talk about some tough topics because there are tough things in this world. And those things will include the impact of trauma and child abuse on young people. So we want you to take care of yourself during this time and during this training. Do what you need to do. If you need it, pause and take a break. Reach out to someone you trust. Use relaxation skills like deep breathing. Stand up and stretch. Pause the videos. We are talking about difficult things, regardless of whether you've experienced them personally or not. So you can't be there for others without being there for yourself. So please start there. Teaching and modeling social emotional skills and being trauma informed may sound like new concepts, but they are already a part of our Girl Scout DNA and what we do in all of our troop meetings. It's built into the Promise and Law, Friendship Circle, and so many things that are part of being a Girl Scout. Building people of courage, confidence, and character who make the world a better place is also building people with social emotional skills to succeed in their lives. And the same is true of having a trauma-informed perspective and using trauma-informed practices. If you are connecting with the people in your troop, reaching out to them, meeting them where they are, treating them with respect and responding to their needs, you're already doing the core principles of trauma-informed practice. We just want to double down and do them even more intentionally. So when I talk about social emotional learning, what am I actually talking about? We're talking about three core things: our relationship with ourselves, those orange sections of this slide, our relationship with others, the green sections, and our relationship with our community. If having a relationship with yourself, with others, and your community sounds familiar, it should. It's a part of being a Girl Scout. And building these skills are what helps young people and adults be happy, healthy, have strong identities, and be connected with themselves and their communities. And those things help people be successful in life. We can't talk about the impact of difficult experiences and childhood trauma without talking about what trauma is. Trauma is defined by the 3 E's: an event, your experience of it, and its effects on you. So, for example, there are some very common types of childhood trauma that we see. Extreme acute events, like a car accident, an assault, or a natural disaster. Chronic stressful events, things that are a daily ongoing part of that child's life, like abuse, poverty, violence, and historical inequity and injustice. And then there's also childhood traumatic grief, which is when a child loses someone in a way that's traumatic for them. It doesn't have to be sudden or violent, but something about that loss is traumatic, and it makes it difficult for them to move through the typical grieving process. So what's an example of this? Let's say myself, my sister, and my cousin and I are all in a car accident. We've all experienced the same event, but our personal experiences of it may be different. For example, for me, it might have been a scary moment that I moved past fairly quickly. But for my sister, her experience of that car accident may be different. So she may, for example, now get very nervous when it's time to go in the car. She may even start acting up at the end of breakfast because she knows soon after breakfast we get in the car to go to school. And then for my cousin, they may have a different experience of that event. So they're okay with riding in the car, but they get very nervous during thunderstorms now because when we had our car accident, it was raining out. Same event, 3 different experiences of it, and 3 different effects. What does it mean to have a trauma-informed perspective? Essentially, it's a lens where we shift how we look at and respond to a young person's needs and behaviors. Many of us who've worked with children have had moments where they are behaving in a way that we just don't understand. We just go, what is wrong with this child right now? What is happening? And that's a traditional perspective. But we want to go beyond that to ask what happened to this child that might be driving their behavior. What are they trying to communicate with us about what they need through their actions? And then that's a trauma-informed perspective. And then we want to take it a step further and go to a healing-centered perspective, which asks not what's wrong with this child or even what happened to them, but what's right with this child? What is right about their behavior that I can recognize and encourage to help them behave in a way that's safe and follows our group agreements? So, for example, say I have a young person kindergartner, who as soon as I let her know that we're going to sing songs later today, she gets so excited, she starts yelling about what song she wants to sing. Now, in the past, in a traditional perspective, you might ask, what is wrong with this child that they are just yelling because we're going to sing? But when we use a trauma-informed perspective, we put on a different lens and wonder, what happened to this child? What's driving their behavior? Maybe this child doesn't have a lot of opportunities to express themselves at home in a way that feels safe to them. So when they're here at Girl Scouts and they know they're in a safe place, they just can't hold back. Or maybe it's just a young person who's really excited to sing. We don't know. But having a trauma-informed perspective means asking that question and wondering what more might be behind their behavior. And then using our healing-centered perspective, we think about what is right that that Girl Scout is doing. And what's right is that they are so excited to sing. They're passionate. They want to participate. So how can I, as a troop leader, say to this child, I am so glad that you are so excited to sing, but I'm going to need you to be a little bit patient and a little bit more inside voice and wait until other people have a chance to sing too and tell me what they want to sing. I'm reinforcing the things that are right with her behavior to help her adjust the things that I'd like her to change. Because her behavior is communication. She's telling me about what she needs and she's experiencing through her actions. This is one of the places where we want to be really aware of how social emotional learning and trauma can impact what a child can articulate. They may not have the words to tell you what they need, but they are telling you through their behavior. And it's our job as trauma-informed, caring, safe adults to listen. We don't need to know exactly what happened that's driving a child's behavior. We need to recognize what they're needing from us. So it's not about why a child might be feeling unsafe and acting out as a result. It's recognizing that the reason they're acting out may be because they feel unsafe, and thinking about what can I, as a troop leader, do to help them feel safer and adjust their behavior. Because they're telling me what they need, and it's my job to figure out how to give it to them. Here are some examples of a traditional versus a trauma-informed perspective. You'll see that in a traditional perspective, you can see a young person's behavior as being directed at you, difficult on purpose, trying to undermine your authority and challenge how you're running your meeting. And that the way to fix it is to lay down the law and punish them. Whereas if we look at it from a trauma-informed perspective, we realize this young person's trying to tell us something, and they may not be totally in control of how they express themselves through their behaviors. It means having a blame and judgment-free attitude and figuring out how to support them to get what they need by recognizing and reinforcing what they're doing right. Why is this so important? It's because trauma-informed perspectives and attitudes and responses support everyone. The young person who's having their best day, the young person who's having their worst day, and the young person who is dealing with something incredibly difficult in their lives, all of them are supported when we use trauma-informed tools and responses. Trauma is incredibly common, and we want to be prepared to support the young people who we have relationships with who've had traumatic or difficult experiences. And when I say incredibly common, I mean 6 out of 10 common. They did a study in California in the 90s that asked people, about 20,000 of them, about two things: their current health and their experiences as children, particularly their difficult experiences. And they learned 3 things that surprised the heck out of them. The first is that these difficult experiences, which they divided into 3 groups: abuse, neglect, and what they called household dysfunction. So things like having mental illness or domestic violence in the household, or even something like divorce or having a family member incarcerated. Things that could disrupt the child's growth and experience. So they learned that these things are incredibly common. You'll see from this chart on the right, many people experience adverse childhood experiences, most even. And the other thing you'll see is that often adverse childhood experiences go together. So for example, if you have someone who's a caregiver and struggling with substance abuse, that could also be more likely to lead to a young person experiencing physical neglect. And you'll notice here that these adverse childhood experiences aren't just physical, they're emotional as well. And then the third thing they learn is that these adverse childhood experiences are incredibly predictive of your health as an adult. That not only if you are a young person who, say, experiences physical abuse, might you struggle with mental health in later life, you're also more likely to get cancer. So there's a profound mind and body connection that they learned about, and that this is incredibly common. I said 6 out of 10 common. So if you think about your troop and you have 10 troop members, that means at least 6 of them are likely to have had, be having, or will have these adverse childhood experiences. So take a moment and pause. Do you know for sure who all of those 6 out of 10 people in your troop having difficult experiences are? You may not know for sure, but the good thing is that you don't need to know for sure. By using trauma-informed practices with everyone, you support all of your participants, all of your troop members. And there are those for whom that support is really essential. Because our young people are like the trees in this picture. They don't just walk in with their own experiences and their own challenges. They're like the tree in that they have leaves, the individual adverse childhood experiences that they've had. But then they also have roots. The community that they are in may also be experiencing adversity. Adverse community events like racism, poverty, unaffordable housing, lack of jobs, or community violence also affects how our Girl Scouts feel. And then there's that soil that these girls are planted in. The historical experiences and cultural experiences, things like slavery, genocide, mass incarceration, the Holocaust, or forced displacement, they're all part of the experience that a young person brings to your troop. We like to say that they carry an invisible backpack, which holds all of these things, all of these experiences, the good and the difficult. And what can be hard for us as people who care about these young people is that we can't change what's in their backpack. We can't change what they've experienced. We can change how those experiences feel to them. We can help their invisible backpacks feel less heavy. They can feel manageable. They can be something rather than a crushing weight, something a child knows they can bear up, carry, are strong enough, and may even someday become a source of strength. And we do that by helping them shift that weight that is in their invisible backpack into a way that helps them carry it. Their beliefs about themselves, about adults, and the world are all of those things that they carry. But we can help them feel safe, capable, and lovable. So if you have a child, a young person whose invisible backpack may be kind of heavy, what might this look like in your troop meeting? There are 4 very common categories of reactions we see to trauma: re-experiencing, avoidance, hyperarousal or being very wound up, negative thinking and changes in mood. Re-experiencing is when that experience pulls a young person back in. So things like flashbacks, nightmares, intrusive thoughts. And that young person then, in your troop mating, may be sleepy, have trouble concentrating, get tearful a lot because their rest is being disrupted. Avoidance. This is the young person in your troop who, no matter what the project is, no matter what you're doing that day, they're about anything else. They're creating distractions. They may show up sometimes and not others, or be resistant to talking about certain things or going in certain places that might not make sense to you at first, like the zoo. If they're experiencing hyperarousal, their brain and their body are in overdrive. They're very wound up. They're easily startled. They're jumpy. They have big physical and emotional reactions to what seem like small things. And they also just don't feel good a lot. They have headaches. They have stomach aches because their body's in overdrive too. And then there's what's happening in their head. Negative changes in thinking and mood, pulling back from other girls, seeming moody or irritable, or the opposite, emotionless or numb, and having negative thoughts about themselves or their future. And I want to be realistic. You could have a person in your troop who is tired, distracted, and doesn't feel good because they didn't sleep well last night because they have a cold. That could match some of these things, but the core is to look for patterns and changes in patterns. If you're seeing a young person where these things are new or much more frequent, it's time to use your trauma-informed lens and wonder if maybe more is going on and this child needs more support from you. Or maybe if it's appropriate to have a conversation with parents, guardians, or maybe someone in your service unit or council. All those things we talked about could be things that you see when a young person has experienced an acute traumatic event, like a car accident, something that's one time. But when you have a young person who's experiencing ongoing, chronic stress and trauma, especially when that comes in close personal relationships, there are some additional things you see. It's hard because those early experiences with unsafe caregivers or people in their lives who are close to them make it difficult for those young people to form and maintain healthy relationships and to manage their intense emotions. But the good news is that while relationships can cause the harm, they are also the source of healing. The connection of a young person to safe adults or caregivers and to adults or caregivers who care about them, like you, are what helps a young person who's had these difficult experiences heal. And if they are having these chronic traumatic events, these ongoing difficult experiences, in addition to the things we talked about before, you may see additional challenges. Things like in younger children, very anxious separation anxiety, crying every time they get dropped off, new fears. The corridor towards the bathroom used to be just a corridor towards the bathroom. Now it's the scary entry to the cave where the monsters live. They may be seeming blank, withdrawn, or aggressive, having tantrums, more and more intense. And they may seem like they're acting younger than they are, having bathroom accidents, playing or talking again and again about the difficult things in their lives. And then as that young person grows up, they can be what in a traditional perspective, we would have called a difficult person, a difficult child. Their relationship with you can run hot and cold. They're clingy the one minute, they won't even look at you the next. They're misinterpreting social interactions with you or your peer or their peers and getting very upset when they do. They're getting into power struggles. And they may be experiencing poor self-esteem, which can lead to provocative or sexualized behavior and trying to cope through drugs and alcohol. These are young people who desperately want to be close to you. They want those safe relationships and they want those close relationships, but they've learned they can be dangerous and hurtful. And I don't want to discount that some of those things, just like the child with the head cold, some of those things can be typical of teenage development. But again, it's about patterns, changes in patterns, and intensity. Trauma happens. It does. We happen too. We happen back. We are also a part of these young people's lives. So even if we don't know exactly what's going on, but we have an intuition something is, the trauma-informed strategies that we use support them. Listening to their behavior is how we give them what we need, what they need. And those strategies are helpful to everyone. Like I said, the scout on their best day, the one who has had a terrible day, and the one who's going through great difficulty. These practices are helpful to all of them, but essential to those young people who are experiencing trauma. And in the next module, we'll talk more about what those practices are. Please go ahead and continue to the next section, which is about trauma-informed care whenever you're ready. Thank you so much for joining us, and I look forward to seeing you in our next section.